Hey everyone, welcome to another Manufacturing Live. And guess what time of year it is? It is the recap of holidays. I got with me Chris. Chris, welcome back, my friend. How you doing?
Hey, thank you. I'm doing amazing. What a great year. I mean, what a great year for both of us. This is just, I'm so happy to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Now, did you catch what the logo is? Huh? We're talking a little cam, a little manufacturing.
The envy that I have is indescribable, Mike. I have to say, the sweater is amazing.
Hey, if you were here a year ago, you would have been part of the cool sweater episodes that we had in December. But
I'm
you
hoping.
know, the having you here has definitely helped because we have some cool things we'll talk about at the end. But before we get into the manufacturing discussion and all the good stuff, please, if you like what we're doing, hit subscribe, hit like, share with your grandma, your uncle, whoever that's going to be. But most importantly, this time of year means we're getting ready for 3D Experience World. And coming up in February in Nashville, we're going to be doing some cool stuff. Registration is now open and the agenda is available. So you're going to be able to see some really cool stuff. Chris is working on some cool things we'll talk about here in a little bit. But with that said, Chris, let's talk about the year that we've went through and some of the things that we've seen, some of the discussions we've had, all of that good stuff. What's your first impression of the last year?
So I think the term I've heard for this year was dumpster fire in general, but I think as far as manufacturing goes, it's so exciting, man. And everybody listening to this, I mean, looking around, I mean, the automation, the move towards more efficient manufacturing, the move towards robotics, is just it's incredible. It's such an exciting time to be in manufacturing this year, especially people coming off of that long break we had. I won't say the C word, COVID, but coming off of that, people are just accelerating, and it's just been incredible. Mike, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in that same boat. I saw a stat a week or so ago that like 512,000 robots were sold last year. So, people are buying technology to solve manufacturing problems at a rate that we have not seen in the past, right? It's an interesting topic, interesting journey. You and I get to have lots of fun conversations as being longtime manufacturing nerds. But it's an interesting thing, and because this is a live stream, we would like feedback from the people in the audience. What are you seeing for manufacturing? Put in comments, put in questions. We want this to be fun. I mean, not just the coolest sweater on the planet, but we want it to be fun. I got this out of the bag just for this event. It stays tucked nice and folded in my drawer. But with that said, let's talk a little bit about some of the more specific things we're seeing, right? Like, what are the common challenges that you're seeing that you've seen this last year in talking with people? And not how do I buy more stuff, but like, some of those more intricate things that are easily solvable, if you will. What are you seeing in that aspect?
Yeah. Was that to me or to the audience? Sorry.
Well, I mean, I want them to add too, but I want
For
to hear
sure.
from you because
Yeah, you were talking a little bit about robotics, and I think robotics is important, but really the way that I see this is it's an indicator of the bigger picture, right? Forever, we've heard, skills gap, there's no machinists, things like that, and there's been this push to do more with less. Heck, since I did my apprenticeship, I mean, that was back when we were making the wheel, and we were still trying to do more with less. But I think now it's crunch time, and more specifically, we need to make sure that whatever we do in manufacturing is intentional and it's not a guess, right? Because we don't have that time anymore. We don't have that time anymore to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw 4 bolts on this fixture and we're going to throw it out to manufacturing and that's it, because that may cost time. And I think more specifically, like you said, it's that the lack of gates or walls, this transparency across about all of manufacturing, specifically is really changing the way that parts are being made, for sure. Whether it's robotics, 3D printing, it doesn't matter. Like, the automation's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard a stat when I was at IMTS of like the average age of machinist in the US is 49 years old.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I take offense to that because, you know, creeping up to that part of it. But at the same time, like you start looking around and the people that you talk to are all our age. And I don't know how we got in a position of being considered experts, because it seems like 2 years ago we were just in our, you know, apprenticeship starting days. But
Yeah.
with that said, you know, one of the things that we talked about at IMTS with Megan Zimba and Mavens of Manufacturing and some of them is, you know, the skills gap is real, regardless of what you want to believe. But more importantly, you can't just sit and bitch about it. You actually have to do something to make a difference. And when you start looking at Megan, Will Healy, Andrew Crow, Titan, all of those folks, they're trying to do something about it to make the world a better place. You know, and we get lucky enough to be in an ecosystem with all of those folks to learn what they're doing and how they're making an impact. But you know, you and I were talking before the discussion, it does take all of us, right? And from your discussions, are you seeing that change happen as well?
Yeah, you know, I am. There's been historically, and I don't think this is anything that's new to anybody listening, but you know, historically, everybody, you know, everybody's like, I work on a team, but it's really individuals. And if not individuals, it's definitely individual groups, right? And excuse me, like you said, the Mavens of Manufacturing, Titan, I think these people are trying to break down these walls that are saying, okay, it's not a mystery how parts are manufactured. This is how they're manufactured. Let's put some thought into it. Let's put some thought into like how we can make these better and faster, right? Yep. Let's let engineering look at this and say, hey, look, this is what we do down here in manufacturing, and that's just subtractive, you know? And yep. Breaking down those walls it's so crucial these days, because you can't operate you know, in a cell, like you, for lack of a better term, you have to have that. You have to have that field view when you manufacture. And I think that is really what all of the influencers now are really pushing. You know, it's not just look at me, I'm cool. It's, hey, look at what we do. Let's work that into everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think any of them are doing it to be cool. I think they're all doing it because there's a need to make the world a better place. You know, it's sort of like, you know, you mentioned apprenticeships, right? It used to be if you got time to stand, you got time to clean. Today's is if you got time to bitch, you got time to make a difference, right? Sort of the same methodology.
No, you're absolutely right.
You know, just so you know, again, if you have questions, thoughts, put them in the comments. Chris and I want to talk about, you know, this stuff with all of you. The one thing I'm going to bring up here, because you and I had a pretty good discussion about this, and Ian's going to help us out here, is, you know, we're recapping and talking a little bit about a video that we found from Elon about a year ago or so, and I think Ian's going to add it in the chat window. But, you know, he sort of talks about the importance of manufacturing, which leads into a lot of topics that we're sort of skirting around. So we'll add that to the comments, but you want to start with the summary of it? It's about a 2-minute video. It covers a lot of good stuff, but then you and I will dissect it a little more.
Yeah. So really what the video is saying is, you know, that there's so much time put into the design of a product, right? And if you look at, when you guys get a chance, if you're watching it now or later on, you know, he's standing in front of a line of Teslas, and then behind him are the rockets, right? So, yep. You know, he talks about how much time goes into designing these things, but there's 100 times more time that goes into making them, the production line, right? If something takes, you know, X amount to design, it's going to take 10X to produce that, you know, to get that factory down. How do we as manufacturing experts expedite that? How do we manage that? How do you and I, Mike, as solution experts, help, you know, our community with their manufacturing flow? That's really what he's talking about. And that's really what I would like to talk about today too, for sure.
Well, and I think that is part of the theme that we've had in the last year of Manufacturing Lives too, right? We need to communicate, collaborate better, and do those components. So, you know, I think you and I have talked about this, like I said, before we got on today, but, you know, the key is there's generally been that throw it over the wall method, right?
Yeah.
And why is there a throw it over the wall method? Nobody comes to work wanting to fail. Nobody comes to work, you know, with the throw it over the wall mentality. Generally, it is a breakdown in communication. You know, engineers do engineering stuff, manufacturers do manufacturing stuff. Traditionally, those have been male dominated, which is never a good thing anyway, because pride and ego gets in the road. And then we end up not communicating effectively, right? And that's really sort of the breakdown that's happened. And, you had some pretty good examples you can sort of talk through in that, from your experience. I'll let you share that, and then we'll talk about the next portion of how we make it better. And I'm going to put you on the spot because that's what you're here to do.
No, yeah, I know for sure. So, in the past, we're talking about throwing things over the wall and having more accountability, right? With design, with SolidWorks makes designing so easy that it's very easy just to put bolts on or chamfers on or fillets on or things like that without really knowing how it affects everything downstream, right, Mike? So let's say, for instance, I make a part, I make a widget, and I put 8 bolts around it. I put a pull pattern. It's so easy to do in SolidWorks, right? I think that was what SolidWorks 2, I think that they put that in, right? So it's amazing, right? You do that right away. But what I, as a designer and engineer, don't realize is how that affects the manufacturing downstream, right? I've been in places where, people come in, everybody wants to make a difference, right? Everybody wants to come in. They come in, they're excited to work. They said, you know what? I see that. I think it's flawed. Let's change it.
Yep.
Which is great, but how do we know that our expertise is superior than the expertise or the folklorish knowledge that was there before? Like, how do we check that, right?
Yep.
And, I think now with automation, with digital twins, it's so much easier and it's so much more efficient to check that stuff. Would you agree, Mike?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that if you think about a journey of an employee, right? Any place you go work, you show up on the first day, you're hired, everyone's excited, you come there, but you don't really know what position you're going to fit into, right? So you're hired, they want you to do X, and you get in the door and you realize, well, these 3 other people sort of do that same X, they've been here for a long time, and all of a sudden you sort of introvert yourself because it's like, well, I don't really know why I'm here, right? And that vision isn't articulated effectively. So you wander around like a new lost puppy, and you stub your toe a few times, and then you settle into, well, I'm just going to do what everyone else is doing because that's the way we've always done it, quote unquote. Key to failure. That's the way we've always done it. And before long, you're just another cog in the same wheel, and what you were hired to make a difference for was never articulated, and you don't make that difference. And that happens in engineering, it happens in manufacturing, it happens in management, it happens everywhere, right? And I think that's where the key of the problem starts, because very few companies sit down and are like, hey, this is, Joanne, she was hired, she's going to do X for us, and make it very clear from upper management what she's here to do on day one. It's like, oh yeah, here's Joanne, she's a new employee. She has 35 years of manufacturing experience. She's going to just make changes in the shop. Well, instantly everyone's like, not my, you're not making changes to my stuff, right? So expanding on what you said, those are random examples of things I've seen, but I think that leads to the greater problem, right? So if you look at the next step of that process, and this is where I'm going to ask for your input because you have a little more experience than I do in this, is we go hire Joanne. She used software X. And so we buy software X because that's what she knows, and that's the fastest way for us to make an impact. But we just bought it because she knows how to use it, not looking at it from a holistic approach of how do we make our business more successful as a whole, right? Oftentimes we hire people for the skill set they currently have, not for the knowledge they're able to bring into a company. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely 100%. There's so much to that. So, I'm going to ask some questions through this, and please throw your answers in the chat. Even if I'm wrong, if I'm right, throw them in there. We would love to hear from you guys. But you're right. These individual softwares, I've seen it a million times, and I'll use CAM software because that's kind of my background. I walked into a place in Simi Valley, and they had a seat of Esprit, and they spent close over $20,000 for this seat of software. and they weren't using it because the person they hired to use it quit, right? So I'm there and they're like, hey, how can we use this software with what we have, being SolidWorks and all this other stuff? So, I kind of helped them and we kind of kludged it together and stuff. But, as I was walking away, I thought to myself, geez, looking back, would that company have bought that if they knew that this was going to happen today? And the answer is no, right? So that was early on in my career. So following that, I always talk to people and I said, listen, if you're hiring somebody for their skills, for their knowledge, for their education, you're not hiring them because they know how to click buttons in a software, right? So you as an employer, right, you need to understand that you're hiring somebody to fit into your system. Yeah, it sounds like, oh, well, I don't want to do that, but well, then maybe that's not the job for you. But really what you need is somebody that's going to come in and use the tools that you have. That's first off, right? Yep. Second off, the tools that you have, right, they have to be purposeful. They have to have a purpose. It's not just the purpose is to run my, Morisiki. No, it's not the purpose. The purpose is to make parts efficiently across the organization, right?
Yep.
So that being said, it's something like, and this sounds like a huge sales pitch, but it's true. Like something like the platform where you have a unified software where it doesn't matter if, Joanne is in the shop, the accounting department, or on the C-level suites, she's going to have access to that product, right, throughout the whole process. And that is the key now, right? So let me ask this. If the guys out there, or women, people out there listening to this, if management came to you today and said, you have to use this new software and plopped it down to your desk, honestly, what would you do? Would you fight back? Would you be excited about it? It's an interesting thing that I to me, it's about 50-50. So I'd be really interested to see what you guys would say in the chat.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of, there's a lot of human problems that arise in companies, right? Yeah. Someone starts a company, they don't start a company to acquire so many pieces of product like Thanos acquired the Infinity Stones, right? Mm-hmm. You start a company to be productive and make your part of the world a better place, whatever that is, right? The interesting component is you start growing over time and you really want an employee, you really like them, and they're like, I'll come work for you if you buy X. So you just buy it, right? And I'm recapping a little bit of what you said there. But the reality is then over time, you end up with all these things that are specific. And then because you really like that person and you have a personal relationship where you don't want to hurt their feelings, the human part of it, you allow those processes to get in the way of being productive. And the biggest problem we have as companies, as businesses, as humans in life is we don't communicate very well. Mm-hmm. Throw in 2 years of everyone working remote and working in disconnected things, we all have to learn how to communicate again. And we all have to learn how to share data. And traditionally, that data protection thing is from the human nature element has always been the problem for companies. Mm-hmm. I see a comment in here that will add to what you're talking about, Chris, and then there's a couple more things we'll talk about on the platform, but Roger put in, the problem is if you have native CAD files in one software and bring them to a new software, management looks at time spent converting.
Yeah.
And that's true. 30% of an engineer's time is spent finding data.
Yeah.
Now, that's an engineer that knows how to use the software to be able to find the data they're looking for. Now, imagine everyone else outside of the engineering department, they have a 0% chance of finding that data because they didn't know that Roger called it part A1, plate 2B. Oh, yeah.
And then add a 13-digit SKU to it or something, and forget it.
Yeah. I mean, so we create this mess, and then we duplicate all the data. And when we're duplicating data, we're creating walls and barriers for people to access it. And coming back to the point of collaboration, you mentioned something about a plate and holes, right? Mm-hmm. Now, it is very easy, and if you look at most plates, they have 4 holes in the corner, and because it's easy, I can just put a fillet on it, and I can put a hole in the center point, and it parametrically updates, and my job is done. But what we don't see in that equation is where is the machinist clamping that part? Where are all the other parts being clamped? And am I creating a custom fixture because I put that hole right there? Traditionally, when you have separated systems, you don't have access to see what the machining cell looks like, or the welding cell, or anybody downstream. And so you throw it over the proverbial wall because you don't have access for yourself to investigate and help them be successful. Right?
Let them deal with it. They'll figure it out. It's the shop. They're smart guys. They'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to you get hired on the first day and you get your toe stubbed of that's manufacturing's problem.
Right.
So whether you want to help or not, you went into this ecosystem of closed walls and closed borders. Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise for everyone on the planet. The next generation that's going to come up, that's not how they work. They grew up in the social environment of everybody works on the same thing and learns. So having your data in one location allows you to look at the manufacturing setup from previous jobs. Am I making this part on time? Can I see what that welding cell looks like? And maybe if I just move those holes a ½ inch, it still fits the design, still fits the parameters of simulation. But guess what? I can now just slop that part right on the machine and run it in conjunction with the others, which saves me time. Those are the things that get missed when you have everybody doing different softwares that all gets translated.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And this does actually, it reminds me of like when I first started out in industrial design, we were putting stickers, we were putting little decals on Plantronics headphones. We were doing models of Plantronics headphones. And they put it on there. So why are you putting it there? And he said, I don't know. It just looks nice. Right. Yep. And that's kind of stuck with me with my career. It's like, why are you putting 4 holes in that plate? Because it makes sense. There's 4 corners. Yeah. All right, well, not 3. Why not 1 in the middle? Why not 2 on either side? Like, I don't get it. Like, why aren't you not doing that? And this is coming to what you're saying, Mike. So I think this is coming back to this year, especially coming back into the shop. I think there's a lot of people that became makers. There's a lot of people that bought machines or ran machines or at the very least researched. And when I say machines, subtractive, additive, robots doesn't make a difference, right? Yep. So now these people, whether they're machinists or engineers, it doesn't make a difference. They're coming back into the workforce and they're like, hey, why don't we have a robot? Or, hey, why are we doing four holes in there? I want to ask these questions. And like Roger said, if you're in different softwares, people are going to be like, well, how am I supposed to know, right? How am I supposed to know if that's right or not? But now with the way software is, and again, breaking down those borders and barriers, there's more awareness and more openness when it comes to designs, engineering, even manufacturing.
Yeah. Well, and, being a car guy, one of the favorite images I love seeing, and this is a perfect example of engineering maybe not talking to people that have to service it, is Cadillac in the 90s that put the starter in the middle of the engine block. Yeah. I'm sure there was a reason for space, but when you think about an engine running, an internal combustion engine, it creates a lot of heat. Not really the best place to put a starter is in the center of an engine block under the intake manifold, right? You look at a car from the 50s or 60s or going back, it's like 3 bolts, the starter falls out on the ground, hits you in the face. Nope, in the 90s, we got to put the starter in the middle, so you disassemble the whole top of the engine to take out the 2 bolts and then pick the starter out to put the other one in, right? That's a perfect example, and I'm not picking on Cadillac or GM. That's just what pops in my head. But that's a perfect example of engineering had a reason. Mm-hmm. Nobody else knows why. And so you go on social media, you see it, and it's like, well, that's obvious. That's stupid. Who would ever do that? But if you talk to the engineer, I guarantee there was a 9-month process that led to that decision happening, but it was never communicated anywhere else. Right? That's that wall barrier thing.
You're absolutely right. So now how do you see that changing? Let's say, for instance, Mike, I'll put you on the spot. Yep. We're designing a 1990 Cadillac. You're looking at it. How does that change now? Like, is there more information now? What do you think?
I think there's more information. And I think if you're talking about the communication between the different teams and departments, I think, someone from the outside is going to be like, well, how would I service that? Why would that make sense? Right. I mean, if you look at the cars, look at where the hot rodding evolution started. It came out of World War II. People wanted to go fast. And guess where they found all the designers for those cars? On the beach in Southern California, making sculptures out of sand. And they brought them to Detroit and was like, here, design something swoopy and cool and put a lot of chrome on it. And oh, by the way, we're going to go fast, put as big a motor as you can put into it, right? Disc brakes,
Camaros.
From it, right?
Yeah.
But it was that collaboration of multiple disciplines that made success for an entire generation of hot rodding and development that goes today, right? And somewhere along the way, it went into siloed walls and departments and my kingdom, right? So Roger put up a good point. I was trying to be nice, Roger, but you hit the nail on the head. Have you ever heard of a mechanic complain about how stuff is designed, they can't get their hands into spaces? That's another perfect example. In the cab model, it works perfect. I just drop that bolt in. I don't got to worry about twisting it out of that casting, right? And again, engineers have so much that they have to keep track of that oftentimes the most common, obvious things to other people don't make it in, but yet we're too afraid to have that communication and collaboration, because the other part of human nature, which is our biggest killer beyond egos, is it becomes our baby and we have pride in it. And so we don't want rejection, right? How many things around the holidays do you avoid because you don't want to risk a rejection or feeling bad, right? That's sort of what we do in the holidays.
You're absolutely right.
So it's an interesting thing, right?
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And I think bringing it up to now, like, I think if we were in that same situation with the starter in the 90s Cadillac, we'd be able to do a virtual twin on it and say, okay, this is really, we're going to spin it around. How are we going to get in there, right? I mean, we could use all of the tools that we have now that they may not have had in the 90s to look at this in a virtual world and say, yeah. So, it's funny, something hit me, Mike, when you said that, as engineers, I'm not an engineer, I'm a machinist, engineers, have so much to think about, right? Even back in the 90s, think about all the research that went into it. MSDS, pull out the machinist handbook, screw sizes, like all these things. Now with the software, the way that it's going, instead of these siloed softwares where you can look up a bolt or go to McMaster, do this, everything is right there for the engineer to do it. And I think what that's going to end up doing is helping design in general, helping engineering in general, because the brilliant engineers that are coming out of the maker space, that are coming out and getting into the workforce, they're going to be able to have this information at their fingertips to improve the entire process. And really, everybody that's listening and everybody that's talking and everything, that's what we want, right? We want a faster, better, easier process.
Right.
And if we're talking about the year end, the recap, that's where everything's going, right? It's automation, it's robotics, it's making processes easier and more predictable.
It's restructuring, right? That's the thing you and I talked about before. And, you look at it as traditionally, well, if I want to look at the CAD models, then I got to have some basic viewer, right? And then if I have the viewer, then what can I do with it? Well, I can view it, rotate it, explode it. That's it. And when you start talking about platforms, you open it up to where other people can look at it, they can interrogate it, they can do questions, they can raise that, they can ping people, they can, like in, the CAM software you and I are dealing with today, I can pull up a live design review and you and I can share the screen and talk at the same time, right? We're actually able to see that even though one of us is running the software, and the big key is collaboration and communication, and call it what you want, but we all got to figure out how to have insight from every department these days, right?
And that's the key right there, right? You have to be willing to take it and give it, right? You have to be willing to have. So I think there's other people on the line that have been through this also. But when I started, everything was so, why do you need to know that? Just do it. Just make the part. Just design. Just go. You don't need it. Just, hey, stop asking questions. Just do it. That doesn't work anymore. And I think as an engineer or a designer, or even a machinist, we have to. It's crucial that we be okay with other people seeing behind our curtain, seeing our process, seeing the parts that we're making. Engineers, hey, why are you engineering it that way? The wrong answer to that is it's not any of your business, right? The right answer is to make your job easier, right? I mean, that's the right answer for sure. I mean, wow, yeah, that was just an epiphany I had, but you're absolutely right. You said ego a few times. There you go. Talking about how manufacturing's moving. Like, we can't have that anymore. I can't be that old guy in the shop with my apron from like 1912 from some barbecue that I did and just like grumbling in the corner of the shop, right? You can't do that anymore. It's not sustainable, right?
No.
For sure.
Well, and my longtime buddy, Sean Talley, put in some notes that I think leads to what we're talking about here too, is unfortunately a lot of the creature comforts of manufacturing studies are lost when they go to value engineering or cost cutting. And he's correct in that, because accountants get a part of that puzzle too, and generally things get cut. But this is where the communication breakdown happens, right? the first communication breakdown that happens, and we have a webinar coming up in January where we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but one of the big problems that companies struggle with is the clear communication of the goals of a company, what it is, who they are, what their identity is, right? Mm-hmm. And so ownership and management, they have a layer that sits up here, and they know what their mission statement is. They type it out on a form. It gets put in a letterhead. When you start, you get it, and nobody ever talks about it again, right? So there's a mission that generally goes something like, deliver the highest quality product at a reasonable price to make our customers successful.
You've read a couple of those.
And I just pulled that out of my rear because almost all of them say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded legit, right?
Right.
But that's what they do. Well, how many employees and accountants and people down the line actually follow that motto? They don't. They get into, well, what's the MVP? We'll just push out the MVP. We don't got time for anything else. We already took too long on this. We don't have time to discuss this, and we'll just push it out, and then we'll live with the ramifications later. Lo and behold, 300,000 recalls later, then we realize that we have to do something different. So part of that discussion, there are things that get nipped from engineering because maybe it takes longer to develop and it gets crunched on the back end. But a lot of it comes down to upper management having a clear message for what their identity is. You don't always have to be the cheapest in the market, but you sure as heck have to provide value in what it is you're delivering. And a lot of companies have forgotten that over the years.
Yeah, I agree. And, I also think that, you're just bringing us some great points, Mike. Thank you. I think that having that check and balance of, somebody going to engineering as they do now, but I think now it's a little bit upstream, is being able to tell engineering, hey, man, that's awesome, but we need to cut, 50 cents off a part, or we need to cut manufacturing down on that part by, a second, 3 seconds, 8 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, whatever it is. I think having the ability to show somebody why, here's the flow, here are the numbers, like here's that, in the best case scenario, here's that virtual twin that shows you why it's taking so long and how we need to fix it. Because historically, and we've all been there, to have an accountant or even your boss come down to you and say, hey, accounting says you need to make this part, 10% cheaper.
Yeah.
What do they know? They're accounting. Forget it, man. Yeah, but now with that full vision, it's amazing. It's so great. I'm getting excited now about this, because, there's always this exclusion, right, for the rank and file, right? This exclusion of, okay, why are we doing it this way? Why can't we do it that way? Why can't I make it out of 7,000 aluminum instead of 4,000? Like things like that. Like it's cheaper, whatever. It's so exciting. Yeah, it's so great to have that visibility.
Well, and you bring up something interesting there because I know a couple people over the years, right? And I get into some random side discussions on stuff. And, I grew up learning from a lot of people that were doing manufacturing as a consulting type thing, right? We produced your parts, but we always started with what is your end goal and why did you choose this? Because choosing this material, as you mentioned, choosing this process, can we make it for you and just give you a blank quote? 100%. Is it going to be too high for what you want to do? Absolutely. Why did you engineering it that way? Why are you putting a 1 thou tolerance on a 90-degree bend on a sheet metal part that fits as an enclosure that has a 16th gap, right? And it comes to what Sean put in his comments here that spurred this, and I'll read his comment here in a second. But the consulting piece has sort of went away, and I've seen some new companies get new ownership, right? And they're going away from that identity of how we can help you make a better product and really be a value-added partner to, if it's on the print, I just make it. I don't care. I'm just going to make it, right? And that's where the breakdown in communication happens, which makes all of manufacturing worse, at least in my opinion, because the less we communicate, we're just going to start making overpriced things and we lose market share. That's how it works, So Sean's comment was, and like I said, I know Sean, and he's a big gearhead guy as well. So his comment was, not to mention new engineers' lack of actual hands-on experience with the products they are designing and manufacturing processes. You know, the current generation didn't grow up in the garage or in the shop, or, you know, making wheels like you did in the early days. You know, we're talking about, you know, the 3D printer is the assumption that it solves all problems. And I love 3D printing, but they all have their place, right? You have to have a mix of components, and a lot of people don't have exposure to those processes today. So really good at taking tests, really good at becoming an engineer and knowing all the complicated things. But when it comes down to, why do I put a 10 thou tolerance on versus a 16th? I don't know. I just put it on the print because it looks cool.
Because I set the zeros on my SolidWorks to like 8 places. That's why.
We go to 9.
I'm sorry, 9 places. Now, was that an update? I'm just kidding. So hey, listen, I haven't met Sean. Sean, you're amazing. If Mike likes you, I like you. That's all it goes. I have to disagree a little bit with that. I think now this generation coming up, this generation of makers and maker spaces, those are taking the places of the garages. I think instead of having gearheads that are you know, changing starters and whole engine rehabs and, you know, regrinding headers, all that other stuff, yeah, they're still there. They're not around anymore, but those individuals have moved into buying those 3D, the snap maker, laser cutters, plasma tables. They've become so affordable comparatively to when they were. I think there's this whole group of engineers coming up that I would argue have a better grasp of manufacturing now than they did back in the garage days, because people didn't have a mill in their garage, right? They didn't have a lathe. Well, they may have, but generally speaking, they were buying parts from Napa and throwing them on their car, or maybe taking their block out to get it ground, but they weren't really doing. They had a good mechanical sense, but as far as flow goes, I think the younger, I'm so old, I feel the younger generation coming up has a really good advantage because they have that stuff available to them. That's all. But Sean, you're amazing. And yeah.
I think the kids in high school now have a better grasp. I think there was a long period of time where the shops went away and the technology wasn't available. And that is the reference of the gap.
Yeah. I'll give you that.
You know, I saw an interesting stat the other day that I think it was about a month ago now. You know, when you get old like us, your mind starts slipping. But it was something like mechanical engineering was in the top 10 most regretted majors for college. and it's crazy to me because mechanical engineering is a good profession. However, when people think engineering, they only ever think mechanical. So the question is, and the question I had from that is, like, you have industrial, you have manufacturing, like what I went through, all of those components, like, are we shoehorning people into the mechanical engineering field because it's like a doctor or lawyer name title versus, hey, these guys have engineering mechanical aptitude. Maybe we push them into other avenues where the high-tech business is going to be. I can tell you, for example, if I was a young person, I would go into manufacturing all over again because I would play with robots and all that stuff all day long, and PLCs, like, way better than drawing on a board and doing 2D.
Looking at the Little Beast, I don't know who that is. Thank you for not having a dirty username, Little Beast. But Little Beast says, you know, they're agreeing and they're saying everybody can create 3D models now, but can they design for manufacturability? Basically, is what they're saying. Like, and you're absolutely right, but isn't that a step, right? I'm going to get a printer and I'm going to try and print something, and it's going to turn into a bird's nest of mess, and you're like, oh no, man. What did I do wrong, right? This is this trial and error. Then it's going to be, and I've seen it, you know, on Reddit, you see it all the time. People start with these printers, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to get a small CNC machine, do a little subtractive. Yep. That's how they learn. Now, is that way a lot slower than going to school or on-the-job training? Absolutely, right? I mean, it's not a replacement. Right. Absolutely. I think when people come out of school or really out of the workforce, that's where they learn to do the design for manufacturability, for sure. So great point, Little Beast. Yeah, without a doubt. And thank you for putting your name in there, because that was fun to say. So go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you think about it, think about the standpoint of, like, earlier this year, we had the kids from SEC Milford on, right? And they went to the STEM competition and they had to do some 3D printing of this assembly and this locking mechanism and all had to work. And the number one thing they took from that is 3D printing was the method for them to understand tolerances, that you have to adjust models in a way that works, right? And And from a low cost perspective of, even Titan in his makerspace that he has at home for his kids, that stuff is now affordable to where you can excite a kid's imagination to build things on their own. And I still go back to, if you're not building something almost every day, whatever it is, right? Could be a new spit wad from a straw or whatever that's going to be. If you're not building and innovating, your mind just turns to mush. Humans are built to create at the core. I agree. Regardless of who you are, painting, sculpting, throwing mud, it doesn't matter, right? And I think that's where we get lost of, we just sit and take in information all day long and we don't act upon it. So there's nothing learned, right? I can read articles and stats, but it doesn't do anything for me unless it's something that I'm personally excited about.
Absolutely. And, I saw Roger actually went in and I bring this up because it hits close to home. Said their local high school got rid of basically all their shop stuff years ago, wood shop, machine shop. I suffered from the same thing. I went to high school in Chicago, Gordon Technical High School, right? Huge shops, wood shop, machine shop, all this stuff. Yep. Now it's DePaul College Prep. And they changed all of those shops into computer rooms. And that's just the way it goes. And I think, Mike, that's really what you're saying is the exposure to that, like having that exposure at home now because it's so inexpensive, or it's more inexpensive than it was. It's taking the place of those shop classes, right? Which, I mean, that could be a whole nother episode, right? I mean, is it better to be self-taught? Is it better to be taught at school? Like what's the best way to train the upcoming engineers and machinists? Again, that could be a whole nother thing, but yeah, Roger, thanks for bringing that up because that is a problem, is training people early on, for sure.
Well, and I think it's, this gets into a little bit of a topic that we're not going to address here because we're almost to the end of the hour. But, you talk about schools and you talk about initiatives, and it gets into a philosophical debate of what are we doing to make that a priority for the school? Because the schools are listening to somebody when they're making a decision. And if we're not voicing it, then they're going to cut it, right? And here in Nebraska and in Colorado, where I lived for a decade before, there are a lot of companies that made it a priority to have the schools bring that back. They're like, look, we want to hire people locally. We want to keep people local. Here in Nebraska, there was one high school that I used to play sports against. They bulldozed down half of their building and put in a tech division sponsored by the state because people are leaving that area and they want people to stay in the community because the community is only successful when the people stay around. And that was all driven by local manufacturers, local hospitals, local ag equipment companies. They all got together and pushed the initiative to the school as far as guidance. And that's where it takes us to help push that. And it seems overwhelming, but teachers and managers and owners, they're all looking for answers just like you as the employee. And that's
everybody answers to somebody, right?
Everybody answers somebody, and usually it's the dollar bill or whatever currency you're using. But at the end of the day, there's an assumption that it just went away. I'll just complain about it. And in some instances, you don't have any control. But in a lot of instances, those decisions were made because there was nobody there voicing an opinion that, hey, this is important to our community.
Yeah. I have to say, Mike, and knowing you for as long as I have, and being involved with your extracurricular stuff in Nebraska, it's incredible. I have to say, I don't know why I would pitch Nebraska as a state, but their initiatives for bringing and keeping skilled labor are incredible. Like, really, the initiatives are really great, man. I could probably think of a couple other states that kind of just say, well, hey, that's it, everybody left, we're just going to be okay. But Nebraska in general is incredible. So there's a pump for your state. Also, there's been a couple things in a couple comments, and it's so true that basically what they're saying is, there should be some kind of program where the engineers spend time in the shop when they start, right? And someone mentioned that they believe that some companies like Zimmer and GE, they require a manufacturing background for so many years for, I don't know, management or something. These are amazing ideas, right? I mean, how many times have we worked for somebody that's like, dude, you don't even know how to run a drill press, man. Why are you telling me how to run my 5-axis machine, right?
Yeah.
Whether they know it or not, right? I think that's really great. And what they're talking about is on-the-job training. And I think amazing. So I guess, this is going to be more of a existential question because we're almost up, but, that going hand in hand, which one is more important, right? Having people learn on their own in their shop, having on-the-job training. I mean, I know the answer's a little bit of both, right? The answer's a mix, right? But I think it really depends on them. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think it depends upon an individual, right? Someone like I that have trained thousands of people over the last several decades, there's three ways people learn, right? Hearing, seeing, and doing. And depending upon the individual, some people can just see it and do it. Some people have to hear it from others to be able to do it, and some people, I can watch a YouTube video and I can, disassemble a rocket. It depends upon the individual. But, there was an interesting thing in there mentioned, and I'm going to start a fire as we end here, but it's the end of the year. Let's just do it.
Let's do
it. Along with the Elon message earlier, I know he's a polarizing figure right now, but one of the things that I think I've seen him quote before, so, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but is a lot of companies, especially as they seem to get a little bit bigger, they put a lot of weight on where you went to school and what your degree did that you got 25 years ago, not your ability as a person to contribute to a company. One of the things I believe that would help a lot of struggling companies with process and understanding is, hey, if you're a good person and you have a skill and you have the ability for us to help make this world a better place, but you didn't go to XYZ four-year degree university, you should still have a shot to be in that management position to help the company be better. You should not see a cap of your position based on what a decision you made when you were 18 years old.
1,000%. What did you do? What have you done? Oh man, we're gonna be all worked up before we leave. So like, what have you learned? The things that I've learned in my career outside of school, I don't even know how it's so ridiculously more, exponentially more than what I learned in school. It's just to limit the opportunity of a company by saying you didn't go to this school. Oh God, it's just, I see that too, Mike. And I definitely see more, hey, you know what? I had this YouTube channel where I built jet engines. Check it out. Oh, cool. We're going to hire you. I think that may carry more, hopefully someday carry more weight than, a sheepskin somewhere.
I mean, do I want a doctor to go to school to work on me? Absolutely. But if we're talking about how do I make my manufacturing process better, I don't have to have an MBA in business to understand how to improve my manufacturing process if that's what I've lived for 20 years.
Yeah.
I need to be clear on that, right?
Yeah. I'm an accountant, but I've watched tons of videos on heart surgery. I'm good, man. We can do this. Like, no.
I agree. I watch Predator. You just squeeze it with your hand. That's how it works, right? But I mean, to my point is, I have lots of friends that are way more talented than myself that are capped where they're at because of a degree, and they've been doing it for 20 years. I myself have been turned down for jobs over the years because I didn't even get in the door because I don't have a four-year degree. Which is even more funny when I turn around and then have to go help train their people on how to improve the processes. And it sounds like I'm being bitter, but I'm not being bitter in the sense of, oh, woe is me. I'm being bitter in the standpoint of, I am sure there's other people within that organization that have the skill set to do this that aren't given the time.
Right.
And I think when we talk about communication, collaboration, we need to look at all aspects of our company to be successful. Because again, coming back to, if ownership has a clear message that everyone buys into, then it should not matter what your past is. It should matter, from the cheesy, your experience, right?
Yep.
If I go buy a car, it's an experience to buy a car. If I need medical attention, it's an experience. And what we're trying to do is, as a company, provide an experience to someone else to be successful. Not plugging 3D experience, but that's the value of it, right? A designer has an experience making a component. A manufacturer has an experience. How do we align those things to where everyone can be on the same page?
Yeah, because honestly, again, it sounds silly, but if that experience is bad, you hate your job. and I was going to use a swear word there, but you just really hate your job. If you have a bad experience, that's the way it goes, and it's funny, I heard a saying a long time ago, people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. But I think at this point, maybe, people don't quit jobs, they quit software, right? I mean, at some point, if you're struggling and you just hate whatever you're logging into every day because of the board, because of the walls or the borders or whatever, it's not fun. It's not what we want to do for a living, for sure. But, going back to just really quick, I know we're running out of time. I would love at some point next year to run a poll and see how many of our viewers have degrees and how many don't, and how many are working in industry. I think, and it could be anonymous. We're not going to throw anybody on blast. I know that it might be a little touchy subject for some people, but I don't have a degree. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with saying that because I've spent the last 30 years, manufacturing stuff, and that's okay.
So it's interesting. I went to Milford, 2-year school, right? Mm-hmm. Took manufacturing engineering tech, and my plan from the beginning was I'm going to get out in 2 years and I'm going to start learning real world stuff while everyone else is learning theory. I may not make as much to start because I don't have the piece of paper degree, but my breadth of knowledge and the connections I make will set me up for the long term, beyond someone that goes to 4 years, goes out, gets a job, and just stays at that job. Mm-hmm. And so my goal at 18 was I need a breadth of experience to understand how the world works, because I don't even know if I want to be in manufacturing. I don't know if I want to be an engineer. I don't know what I want to be. And a school can help me understand what the basic principles are, but until I go live it and experience it myself, I don't know. And I think part of the problem we run into today is people are pressured to pick something that they're going to live for the rest of their life, and then they feel if they change, they're going to get ridiculed. And that's part of the thing we got to go.
Or a waste of money. Like, oh, you waste your money. You majored in this, and now you're something else. Yeah, absolutely.
So, we took up a lot of time here, and I hope it was a good discussion. But, when we talk about everything we've done in Manufacturing Live this year, all the topics we just talked about is a summary of every discussion we've had with industry leaders and customers throughout the year. How do I manage? How do I make better products? How do I get people to communicate and collaborate more effectively? And more important, how do I get a team pulling all in the same rope? And at the end of the day, it comes down to a simple thing. We have to learn how to communicate as a team and a group. We have to understand the clear vision of the company of what it is we're expected to do. And most important, we have to share the data for everyone to make the correct decision. Life moves too fast to make decisions in a silo today. Mm-hmm. It does. So with the seriousness, we'll get into, a couple things that we want to mention. As I mentioned in the beginning, 3D Experience World registration's coming up. Chris, what are you going to be machining at 3D Experience World? You're in the shop floor with me, my friend.
I can show you if you want to see it, or you want to leave it as a surprise, Mike.
We'll leave it as a surprise, but talk about it, because Ian might have a heart attack if we go to sharing screens in the middle of this. Oh, yeah,
that's true. Ian's our producer, everybody. Ian is amazing. And at the year end, I just want to actually give a shout out to Ian, because he's the linchpin that holds this whole live stuff together. So thank you, Ian, very much. So on the shop floor,
we didn't communicate or collaborate to him that we were going to show ahead of time, so we probably should.
Yeah, we probably won't. We're going to have a couple machines on the floor this year. It's going to be amazing. Those of you that have been to 3D Experience in the past, you know that there's a little shop area that's cordoned off, and we're going to have a 5-axis Doosan mill and a mill turn machine. We're going to be machining on the mill. I'm going to be doing some pretty cool belt buckles that are themed for our 3D Experience World. On the lathe, on the mill turn, they're going to be doing some etching on some coffee mugs. It's going to be amazing. And yeah, this stuff kind of sounds funny and swaggy, but we're really putting a lot of time and effort in making these things look really neat. And so make sure that when you guys come to 3D Experience World, because I'm sure everybody listening is going to and watching is going to, stop by the shop, give us a high five. I'll be the guy in the shop coat by the mill, and Mike will be the one behind me yelling at me to go faster. for sure.
Yep.
So
I need 10% reduction. Let's go.
Absolutely. It's all about communication, man. It's all about communication.
We'll have some cobots. We'll have some CNC 101, some cobot 101. We're working on trying to get Dr. Presso. Last I heard it was in Asia, so hopefully it'll be around the planet by the time we get here. We have some touch screens and things like that set up too. And then we'll have plasma cutting. We'll be doing some cool stuff with that because coming out right around 3D Experience World, we're adding nesting and fabrication cutting to the stuff that we talked about, which is sweet, along with the additive. We're getting additive about that time as well. So we'll be able to do some additive things. And I think the belt buckles you're creating are going to start as additive printed components, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We're getting printed in metal. And so, again, not to go too off, but as we know, printing in metal is great, but most of the time you end up doing some machining afterwards. So we're going to do some examples of that. Two things that I just really quickly want to say. Cobot, I want to just say some definitions that we said. Mike mentioned MVP. For those of you that are curious what that means, it's the minimum viable product. So what's the least that we could put into this product to make it sell? And the other thing was cobot. This was something that was new to me. A robot is something that runs by itself and will kill you. A cobot is something that runs next to you and tries not to kill you. Okay, so that's the difference between robot and cobot, right? So robots kill you. Yeah.
Terminator versus Wall-E. Yeah. Wall-E is a cobot. He wants you to be all right. Terminator is a robot that just wants to kill you.
That's right. So anyway, I just wanted to, if anything, hey, some people learned a couple things today. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, so I can't forget, we got to pay the bills here, Chris.
Yes.
Manufacturing. Yes. So we'll be talking about this Friday, December 16th at 12 Eastern. We're going to be talking about CAD fundamentals with Mike Britton from BattleBots. How awesome is that? He's part of Team Malice. Mike uses SolidWorks X Design to create some killer stuff. So they're going to be talking about that when we talk about platform communication. X Design is one of those design components that allow you to communicate and collaborate better. You should, if you're listening, I hope you've already subscribed to the channel. But, with all of the bills paid, Chris, what's your final thought for this year?
Final thought of this year is, geez, that's a tough one. Let's go make things, but let's be open about it. Just open your mind up to new possibilities of ways that you can make things. That's it. I mean, there's been so many advancements in the last year, moving forward. Let's all just keep an open mind and let's make some really, really cool stuff.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. If we don't figure out how to solve it together, we're all in trouble.
You got it. That's why we're working together.
That's right. And so keep out for January. We're going to do one more of these, and then we're going to start a rotation on Manufacturing Live next year. My last comments, we're going to not just have it be the Mike presenting show. It'll be myself and Chris, who's joined, Craig Circanic, John Milbury, David McBriar from the UK. So keep an eye out, talk about it, share some of this stuff. We're going to open this up and have more hosts with different perspectives to do some cool things. And with that, I can't thank you enough, Chris.
Thank you, Mike.